Welcome back to another episode of Analyst Hour. I am your host, Andrew Regan, joined by my co-host, Ryan Cadigan. And in the studio today, we have none other than Pistol Pete Stylos. Welcome, Pete. How does it feel?
Andrew, thank you so much for having me on Analyst Hour. Many of you guys know this is my favorite podcast of all time. I was fortunate enough to be on the first ever Analyst Hour episode back in 2022 with Michael. And it's so great to be back here in the studio with you. And Ryan's done an incredible job as the junior annualist of this season. And I just cannot thank you guys enough for having me on. And I appreciate it.
Of
Let's
course,
go.
Pete. We're happy to have you. But guys, let's get right into it. The 2024 ASL season is officially in the books. A little bit of a deja vu. We had a Colin versus Steven finals. Steven does it again. Comes out on top of the 21-18 victory, putting the Dogs in the history books as the champions. Let's go over some general takeaways. I'll start us off, then Ryan will hand it over to you, and then Pete, you can round us off. But one, I really credit to the Dogs, every single one of them. They all did their job. That is really hard to find when every single guy, covers their own ass and does their job. And that's what the Dogs did. And also, Steven, we pretty much, when we've very been open about it, like rigged the draft in attempt to screw Steven over. He was in we didn't rig the conferences. It just happened to have that he was in an incredibly competitive conference and he still did it. Like he was almost an underdog, like almost like the odds were stacked against him. It is so weird to view Steven as an underdog, but he was in a very competitive conference with the worst team he's ever had on paper, and he still gets it done. So Ryan, give me a few of your takeaways, and if you want, like, what does that say about Steven?
Yeah, man. Michael said it best yesterday when I was talking to him, but like every season you get these moments during the regular season where like you think Steve is mortal or oh, you can beat him and then next thing you know, playoffs hit and he just hits another level, and you even saw throughout your game like he hit another level within the game. Uh I think it's all the credit to him. Just as much as I give credit to Steve, I give credit to Pat. Pat's been there all the time. I think he was my favorite for Role Man of the Year, and I voted for him for Most Improved as well. I know we're going to go over end of year awards at the end of this, so I'm excited to see what those results actually are. But um, credit to that duo, and credit to Tyler Beraldi for stepping up. And he was formerly fourth man of the year. This is one of the few seasons that he's been a starter for like the whole year. So he fit that role seamlessly. They did what they had to do. And yeah, before I hand it off to Pete for reactions, Andrew, I'd like to ask you to kind of take off your analyst hat for a second and put on your player's cap and kind of let us know what was going through your head in this arguably the best finals match we've seen in ASL history.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to dedicate enough time to that conversation, so I'll try to make this quick before I give like a full platform, full
Oh,
attempt to
okay.
really
If
cover
you
it.
want
I'll
to do
try to.
another, we can just
No,
wait.
I'll do it in 10 seconds or less. We all
Okay.
had a ton of faith into this game, but Steven's inevitable, and I want to give the same critique of the Thunderbirds and Colin as I did Connor Fu last week. If we couldn't get it done this year, when can we get it done?
Yep.
So that's just something to entertain. I want to dive deep in later when we kind of really look at it without my analytic or commissioner cap. But yeah, Pete,
Totally.
what do you think?
So I'm going to reveal to the podcast that throughout the entire offseason, my prediction was that Steve was going to go down this year. And I have no shame in being wrong because that's just what Stephen Shaw does. He's the greatest of all time. There's nobody that can stack up against him now, honestly. I think it's really said and done that he's the greatest Andover streetball player to ever play in the league. But man, that finals game was something, man. It was a treat. Back and forth, so many lead changes. I don't even know how many lead changes there were, but It was incredible. Colin was hitting some crazy shots. And I got to give my absolute hats off to Andrew Regan, who is playing his absolute best out there. Andrew was toe to toe with the GOAT. He was making him frustrated. You saw Stephen Shaw was very flustered at some points in that game. And there was a little chit chat at one point, I remember, but this is ASL playoff basketball. And especially when you're fighting for the championship, that's when you're going to have the most physicality. And those games are so important because every possession matters. And you can look at one play being like, oh, this is where, it all, turned around, or this is where it all went downhill. But man, shout out to Andrew Regan. He absolutely did amazing on defense. He was clamping up, he was clamping up a Gurgis last round. He was clamping up, Steve for the most part. Obviously Steve can't be clamped, but he was making it really hard for him, obviously. But also, I just wanted to shout out as well, Tyler Beraldi, man. We saw him 3 years ago take on Steve on the opposite side. He was playing with Colin on Caddyshack, and I'm sure you guys all remember that was the 20-point game that we had out of Steve. It was one for the ages for sure. But this one definitely feels way better if you're Steve Shaw, because we literally tried to nerf him and give him the worst team possible. And I was saying to Andrew, I said, hey, this is Steve Shaw's worst team he's ever had on paper. And he still winds up getting it done and got his teammates involved. And I got to say, Pat Archambault is number one, easily the most underrated player in this league. I strongly believe that after all the contribution he's had to the dynasty, because let's not, as great as Steve is, his guy Pat was just as big of a contribution to that dynasty. And speaking of Pat, we got to talk about AJ too, because just until this year, AJ Clark has made the finals in every single season except this one, which I thought was really crazy. But it just really shows how Steve can get the job done no matter what. He's got that dog mentality. He's got the killer mentality. It doesn't matter who he's playing. He's going to go out there and he's going to win. Sorry if that was a long monologue, but
that was great.
No, I love how you threw in some history as well.
Yeah, and I just shout out to Tyler, because he really deserved that ring. Like, if you don't want to feel happy for Steve or Pat, be happy for Tyler, because that guy works so damn hard. He comes all the way from Amherst to play in these games. We all love Tyler. He's been great, the past 5-6 seasons that, he's been in the league. He's always, helped us out whenever we need, always a great host with the banquet. But, if you were salty about Steve winning again, just be happy for Tyler, because that man puts in the work and he deserved it. And I'm pretty sure, I think CJ is the first ever rookie to win an ASL championship. I'm not sure if that's 100% confirmed, but I think he might be.
Maybe so.
Interesting point. Yeah, we'll have to look into that. But yeah, you really touched on everything, Pete. I thought Tyler definitely deserves a lot of flowers defensively as well. I really wanted to give him a lot of props last week for locking up AJ. I couldn't get by him. He also fought through every single screen. So, I mean, he shared with me after the match or the game that, he knew he has the height and weight disadvantage in his past 2 matchups between me and AJ Clark. I apologize. So what he just had to do is he just had to be more active than we were. And that's exactly what he was. And so it was really good to see that, even though on paper this was Steven's worst team, but even the new guys that were stepping up to the plate had their own fortes and had their own ways to impact the game, which really carried over. And obviously Steve was able to seal the deal. Now we can kind of get into more of the discourse of it. There's only so much to analyze. I would love to kind of just fire off questions at each other and start talking. I want this to kind of be more fluid. So Ryan, I'll answer your question you posed at me a bit ago. Yeah, the mentality was we think we have a better team. And if we just simply correct our past mistakes when we lose, we should take care of this game. And the mistakes that we wanted to focus on were not allowing big runs, big coming out, and we wanted to come out hot because we usually come out flat-footed. And we did both those things. We jumped to I think 6-1 or 7-1 lead, and that was the biggest lead of the game. Other than that, I don't think a lead exceeded 3 points. So we were able to do that. Yeah, there were some, I mean, they definitely had runs. It's a game of runs. That's inevitable, but there weren't any crazy, like, aside from them coming back, like those 5-6, like game weighing runs. So we were able to do that. When it came to the 18-18 game, or I think it was 18-17, we were kind of under this impression that, all right, whoever the winner of this game is going to have their ball in their hands within the next 15 seconds, meaning whoever can get this last run is going to win the game. Our goal was, we were on defense at the time, get the ball back and call a timeout, and we figured that was going to be it. However, we were never able to call that timeout because we were never able to get that ball back. It was just a game where it was blow after blow, punch after punch, and the Dogs got the last hit in that sent us to the canvas. It was an incredible game. It was so fun to play in. Probably my favorite ASL game I've ever played in. Again, we don't really have any regrets. We were talking with each other after the game, just like, hey, we just simply weren't the better team. And we really don't think we were super outworked. Obviously, there was a few plays that we were outworked, but we don't really think that was the narrative of the game, considering how close it was the entire time. We thought we ran a really efficient offense, a great defense for how good Steven and the Dogs are. So that was really our mentality. Of course, we were disappointed, but we weren't super discouraged because we really thought we played our best basketball, and that was really it. It would have been more frustrating if we felt like we lost rather than they had won, but we really think that they had won, not that we had lost. Your response,
Totally.
Ryan?
I think that's a great breakdown. As you know, I was on the call for that when I was doing the live stream of it. So I was trying to pay attention to a lot of the different strategic things that Colin and Steve were both doing we were talking to them on Friday, just like, what are your plans going into it? One question I had for you, Andrew, is I noticed about halfway through the game, Colin kind of assigned you onto Steve as that primary defender. Was that a plan going into it, or was that him noticing during the game that you were getting those pokes and getting under his skin a little bit and decided to make that adjustment in game?
Yeah, I mean, it was in the group text, like, Andrew, get ready to guard Steve at some points.
Okay.
And it really wasn't like Ty's struggling or Colin's struggling, let's throw Andrew on him. The thing was, Steve's gonna get past the first defender inevitably. Inevitably.
Right.
It's better to have the two taller guys in the paint to try to stop his finish than me and one of the taller guys on the team. So with me, setting me up on Steve, I was completely okay with kind of really trying to poke the ball free and just take away the three.
Yep.
Because again, he's inevitably he's going to get past you if he wants to. My thing was, if I just don't want him to feel too comfortable to get a three off, because that's where they were able to really string a little bit of a run. I think he hit like 2 threes, and
Yep.
that really crawled back into the game pretty quickly. So that was really it. It wasn't like a so and so struggling, Andrew's a better defender or a more elevated defender. It was simply just strategy, and yeah, it worked well as it could have, but that was really it. To a long-winded way of answering your question, Ryan. I mean, from your perspective, now we can kind of open it up, and Pete, I'll hand the question off to you in a bit. Is now that the game's over, aside from Steve, right? What was the driving factor for the Dogs' victory, or you could say what the driving factor was for the Thunderbirds' loss?
Yeah. So a couple things kind of stuck out to me. I mean, I think Pete hit the nail on the head giving you your flowers. Like, this was the best. Like, I had said on Friday's episode that the Seabirds was the best I'd seen you play. And then I thought you played better than that in the finals. So that's huge for your personal stock and you kind of not shying away from the moment. And I think you do, you do shine in those moments. If the ball, if you guys were to score one or two places more, your name would be on that trophy a second time. But I guess I'll give my 2 points, one from each team. The point I have for your team is I was a little disappointed with Tyler Trapp as a first round pick. I think he only had like 1 point in the game. As your first rounder, we were just talking about him on Friday about how him and Colin kind of lean into this offensive dynamic that they have. When one's not going, you can get the other going. And, Andrew, you held up your end of the bargain. You had like 5 or 6 points in the game, which was, more than what was expected from you. You got to get more output from your first round pick, especially when a guy like Beraldi is on him for, at multiple points in the game. I don't know if that was a lack of aggression from him, or a game plan on you guys on moving the ball, or whatever it was. I'm not sure, but I think if you get 1 or 2 more shots that fall from him, or just that little bit more of aggression on Trap's end, I think we could be having a different conversation right now. So bottom line is you need more from your first rounder. He deflected some shots in the paint a couple times, got a couple good rebounds. I was expecting a little bit more from him. I thought Colin looked great all in all. Like he really, and I was saying this on the call, but like he got into his rhythm. He found his spots. He made a good amount of his shots. If this wasn't a finals loss, we'd be saying he had an incredible game. Like that on an objective level, I think he did. And then obviously you did what you did. And Ian only played in 1 rotation and was all right in his 1 rotation. But at the end of the day, I think, if your first round pick is getting you 1 point in the finals, that's an issue, especially against Steve Shaw. So I think you got to look back at the drawing board there if you guys were to reevaluate going into next year. And then on the other end, the moment that did it for me, not necessarily the player, but the moment. So like I thought Pat was missing a decent amount of shots throughout the game, despite them being good looks. But it was at 18-17 mark where it was off a rebound. T-Birds were scrambling to get back to their defensive positioning. I think it was off of a missed 3. Dogs find their spacing, and Pat finally just sees one goes through top of the paint, making it 19-17 or 19-18, inevitably leading to the 2 1-pointers that the Dogs had to reach 21. For me, that was the game changer for the Dogs. And that's why you draft a guy like Pat, because he shows up in those moments. And that inevitably, in my eyes, like that shot was symbolic of what the T-Birds were missing in their first round pick and Trap in this game.
Wow. Before I hand it off to Pete, is that true? Did Ty only put up 1 point?
I don't know that
exactly. Our first point, I know that.
I've talked to a couple people. I've heard 1 point. I only recall 1 point. It could very well be more, but the fact that we don't really know is also a problem in and of itself. So I'll leave it at that. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Pete, what was the driving force behind the Dogs' win and the driving force behind the T-Birds' loss?
Okay, first of all, I want to say, Ryan, that was a great breakdown, great analysis. You stole some of my points, but I will try to, echo some of what I really liked, and also a couple of different points. But I just gotta say, from watching it on the sideline, you really could tell that the Dogs just wanted it way more. And like, I'm not talking about you, Andrew, because like I know, like, you were locked in, you were doing whatever it took. I just feel like, I don't know, like the sense of urgency wasn't there. Like this is the championship, and like you saw Steve and Pat and Beraldi, the fire in their eyes was just, and they were moving with purpose, and they were out hustling everybody. Like Beraldi grabbed a couple rebounds that I was like, wow, like that really saved the possession. And then, he wound up, making the right plays, and they were also passing the ball a lot well, or better rather, I should say, than the T-Birds, I felt like. And Andrew, like obviously, you're not really known for your offense, but you did way more than, what was expected of you offensively. And yeah, Tyler, I really think, he could have done a lot better. I know obviously Colin and Tyler are really close, and, they're good friends and stuff. But, obviously if you're Colin and you're searching for another championship, do you really, want to take your friend over somebody that could potentially like put you over that hump to get another championship? Because it's been since before COVID, since Collins won. So I don't know. I really think that the Dogs just wanted it more. And I think Steve was, a lot more fired up. I'm not trying to say that Colin wasn't, but like obviously Colin had a great game, and like Ryan said, if you guys won, we would probably be talking about Colin's game a lot differently. But yeah, Colin, he did well, but I just feel like he could have been a lot more aggressive. And you could see like at some possessions where Steve was not messing around. And he was just like, all right, STFU, just give me the ball and I'm going to drive to the hoop. And that's what he did a couple of times. So where I was like, yeah, this is pretty much over. And especially that Pat Archambault 3-pointer that Ryan was talking about, that was probably where I kind of saw it being like, okay, yeah, this game's kind of over. Also, I know it was tough because there was no other fourth man out there for Steve, but I think Ian probably should have played a little more. I know, like, you obviously want your three best guys out there for the championship, but Ian literally had such a great season this year. And I think, for some spurts, he could have came in that he didn't. And, unfortunately, because of, how good Steve Shaw is and how he has that chemistry with Pat, he was just able to outlast the T-Birds and once again win another championship. And, I don't know if these two are ever going to be broken up, but somebody please do it.
Andrew, I want to touch on one thing Pete said and bring it to you because it kind of leans in what I want to hear your thoughts on. But I agree with Pete in that I saw the Dogs wanting it more, but I didn't see that until the second half, we mentioned earlier, like Steve hit another level in the game. I actually was saying the opposite on the call in the first half was I actually thought everything was going the T-Birds way. You guys, like you said, you went on that run first. You got to halftime first. I thought you were making the energy plays there. Like we saw Steve's frustrations come out in the first half. And then that switch kind of flipped in the second half. And that's when you saw Steve kind of take it, one man doing the whole thing, getting to the hoop, finding his spacing, all that stuff. Like, I guess what I'm asking is, do you think that's a fair assessment? Did you see that flip a little bit later into the second half when they started to find their rhythm? And I know, no one ran away with it, but could you feel that difference?
I'm so glad you're giving me a platform to defend the T-Birds right now because I respectfully couldn't disagree more. I'm telling you, no one put in more homework than Colin to draw us up a game plan. We get there early, we do our pregame rituals, and when we're out there, we're really hungry. I think what it really boiled down to, and there were definitely some plays where a lot of us didn't have any gas left in the tank, and that reflected in some offensive rebounds going the Dogs' way, and they had that last series as well. So I don't think that reflects on the T-Birds not wanting it, despite it looking that. I don't think that's crazy. Just when you're out there, and I guess we would make some of the mistakes where if someone's beyond the, defending a 3-ball and the ball goes up, they kind of check out. And then someone, we kind of mentally delegate the responsibility to someone else. And maybe that's a symptom of not wanting it, perhaps, but I think it more speaks volumes to how tired you are.
Yep.
And the Dogs really didn't do that. And Steve is obviously the flagship symbol of it, of like, not that he doesn't trust guys, but he really takes on the responsibility of the task, but they all want to do it. They all want the sole responsibility of the task. So I think they over exceeded what the average Joes would do, where I think the T-Birds, when they were incredibly tired, they almost deferred to the average Joe. And honestly, and again, two more things I got to state before we round off this topic. One, in terms of Tyler Trapp, I think he played an incredible year. He was that offensive weapon Colin needed. Everyone said this is the best team Colin has ever formed, despite it. Also, I mean, we don't give Colin enough credit. Like, yes, the draft was rigged against Steven, but who was like collateral damage of that? Colin. Colin got Ty and Pat got Steve. Other than that, it was fair play. So Colin was kind of fucked over as well.
Yep.
So I do want to give Colin that credit. Ty was great. Ty had a great year. He hit incredible threes. If that 1 point is true, which I'll take your word for it, you're right. We would need more out of him. He was handed with the really tough defensive task with guarding Steve. And if it, shoulda, woulda, coulda, if a few more of those shots went in, it's whatever. I appreciate all the love that you guys gave me about my playoff run. Warming up and stretching makes all the difference. I really saw the benefits of it this playoffs. Hopefully I earned a draft back to the T-Birds part 2 or whatever, but it was an honor to play for Colin again, and with the coaching of MK from the sidelines as well. It's a great environment, and ASL is only as good as how bought in your captain and your team is, and it's an honor to play under a guy who is bought in. But there we go. The headline is Deja Vu. Steven does it again, defeats Colin in the finals. Ryan, you look like you're itching to get one final word out before we
Well,
jump.
no, I think this is a good transition a little bit into the next part of the show we wanted to get into. It's partially your teams, partially retrospect, looking back at the year as a whole. I think it's only fair given the discourse we had on Friday, but is Colin on fraud watch slash does he have to break things up? We've talked about for about 30 minutes last episode how Connor and Shu can't get it done. Does Colin?
Whoa, do you think you should break it up with Ian? Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, not necessarily Ian, but like, I guess my point is, does Colin need to try something different? Does he need to have a new approach that he hasn't yet taken?
Call me biased, call this wound too fresh, but no, I think Colin formulated the best team he could have possibly taken. In retrospect, I think the only player in terms of value that he could have gotten that slipped could have been, I would not call you crazy for saying he should have taken AJ over Tyler. That is the only thing in my head that I wouldn't like immediately spit on you if you argued that, you know?
And AJ made the
really
playoffs.
Formulated his best team, and that was really it. I again, if this was a series, who knows what would have happened? Steven probably would have won, but well, for the sake of the conversation, I mean, we'll never know. I really think Colin put his best foot forward. I think Colin is far from a fraud. He's a killer. He's a guy who closes it. He's always in the finals for a reason. But that's my take. Pete, what about you?
Yeah. So no, I wouldn't say Colin's on fraud watch. I think that's a little ridiculous. He's made the finals almost every year since after COVID. So I wouldn't say that's fraudulent at all. I don't want to be mean or anything to anyone. But I think to say that Colin's a fraud is completely unfair. Especially since, there's so many other teams that have not even made it to a finals. And, the fact that Colin has his name on the trophy and the fact that, he has so many records, he has MVPs, you can't call him a fraud. It's too unfair, in my opinion, to put him as a fraud because he still won a championship. He's still done what a lot of players will never accomplish in this league, which is winning a championship in the ASL. And I think, that there's some other names that you could put in a fraud watch activity.
Oh,
all right, Pete.
right. Ryan, why don't you answer your own question?
Yeah. So obviously, I don't think Colin individually is a fraud. Obviously not. It's a crazy take. What I will say is, I think this was his best year to get it. Obviously, looking at the conference disparity, you have to think that will be addressed in some way, shape, or form this offseason. And like you were saying about the draft positioning, like he was able to get the guys he had liked playing with in the past, and you and Ian, and also get a guy of Tyler Trapp's caliber that people were rating quite highly, despite him going towards the end of the first round, just because he was rookie, a little more unknown. Colin had that relationship and friendship with him that I think kind of added that value to him going later in the first. Like, I think that's why I view it as like valued a little bit higher than where he actually went. So I think if you look at that, you look at the conference you guys were in this year, and like you look at the team that Steve had, like you got to think that you can't expect all of that to go his way again next year. If I'm Colin, and this may be selfishly as a friend of Ian's and maybe wanting to play with him at some point in the future, but I would try to look to move on from Ian. See if you can, like, Ian's a great role for a lot of different captains. He's established himself as Ian Big Shot Hale. He can get you some buckets when you need him. If I'm Colin, I'd be looking for more of like a grit guy, like a Germano or a Bollinger or something that can steal you those extra possessions and, help him get it back out to himself and, his first round pick, and even you with how you've been playing. That's one path I'd look at. I would look to move off from Trap, maybe, depending on who's on the board for him next year. I think you're a great pick always, Andrew. So I'm not going to say don't pick you again, but if I'm him and he tries to build out the shell of his team relatively similar each year, I'd look to make some changes. Like I said about Connor, though, back, in the Schuwerk discourse and how does he build a championship team? Like, I think that's something that you decide in the draft room on draft night, depending on what your options are. But I think it'd be crazy to say, oh, no, just do the same thing again next year when he's now 0-3 to Steve in the finals. Like, you got to make some form of a change. To his credit, he tried the trap experiment. It didn't work. I think, like every season in basketball, like the Celtics have been doing, you take the feedback from what you try, you make adjustments, and you try again next year. And I think this was a great season for him to see what worked and what didn't. And I think he should take that with him into draft night. But yeah, obviously he's not a fraud. He's the second GOAT.
Okay. Yeah. I gotta respectfully disagree. I think this is Steve's league, and we're all just playing in it. I can't give Colin a ton of shit for losing to Steve in the finals. If Steven were to text me one day and say, "Hey man, can't do it this year," just hand the trophy to Colin. And if Colin texted me saying, "Hey, I can't do it this year," then you hand the trophy to Connor. There's always going to be the best guy in the league, and you're right. Like, you do have to switch it up just to try it. I don't think this year was the wrong move on Colin's end by any means. But if he wants to try something different, if I'm Colin and I'm committed to trying something different, which I don't even know if that's the right move, I would tank my third round pick and just try to get in the top 4 first round and see if he can get a really strong dynamic duo guy. Obviously, we don't know this hypothetical roster, but that'd be the only move left in his arsenal that I think could maybe bring a different result. But again, with tanking the third round pick, I don't know. He's a guy who really utilizes his fourth man. So we'll see. But guys, for this next segment, I want to talk less. So you guys both played in this league a really long time, and you both have been such pleasures to have as participants, and you guys are always willing to lend a hand and help me out when running this. So this league ended. We tried some new things. So if we want to treat the ASL 2024 as like a Yelp review, tell me some things you liked. Tell me some things you'd want to see different in the future. Pete, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so the 2024 season in review, man, I've been telling my teammates that the Phantom was probably one of my favorite teams I've ever played on.
Oh.
Our record obviously doesn't reflect what we could have accomplished. I truly believe that. I truly believe we just unfortunately caught fire at the wrong time. We clicked a little too late. I really think week 1, I strongly believe that if we had Dennis, it's a totally different game. I played pretty awful in that one offensively, but there's only so much you can do as a fourth man. But I do want to say though, how about we take, instead of 2 conferences, we just take the top 6 teams with the best record, and that's how we do playoff seeding.
That could be cool.
Rye, what do you think?
Yeah, like I don't think that's crazy suggestion at all. I think that obviously these 2-tier conferences, Colin and Steve at the heads of both, and then kind of other teams just throwing teams together. If we run something like that again, could be something that could be seen as a little monotonous. I think the idea of a big conference and taking top X amount of guys could be a fun solution. I think, inevitably you got to assume that some people won't be around next year. I think maybe making the league a little bit smaller could be more manageable. a little bit more tailored to everyone. So like, I think there's a lot of options that we should be looking at. And that's for the commissioners to decide over the next 8 months or so. But I think that's a fine idea. I think it makes sense because, in conference play, Alex made this point when he was on the call, a few weeks ago, but in conference play, you assume that you're playing your conference more when in actuality, we play every team once. So a big conference probably makes the more sense there. But regardless, if there is going to be other conferences again, I think you should make those after the draft, and you guys should look at past rosters and past rankings to determine that, to assure that this doesn't happen again. Because I will tell you this, the Phantom would have loved to be in the playoffs this year. And like I said, I can't really give you any definitive, this is what we should do right now. Because I think, the finals just happened yesterday. I think we got to sit with this for a second. We got to gauge interest going into next year. But I totally think that there's legs here. I think there's a lot of people that want to help out. I think there's a lot of people that want to see the league go on. And however that may look, I think a new look isn't necessarily bad for this league at this point in its stage.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, downsizing is inevitable at some point. I mean, the battle for subs every Sunday is obviously a large problem, and it doesn't have to be. And all it does is a few guys saying, "Hey, I can't." I'm shooting myself in the foot because I've had a few guys say before the season, "Hey, I can't come all the time. Are you sure you want me to play?" And I've said yes to all of them. So a little bit of this is on me. But yeah, like a 7-team one conference, and just the seventh place team gets eliminated. I think that's a very proper way of running the league. It saves us, the running around trying to get a sub on a Sunday, because I mean that's inevitable. But with eliminating a full team, we're only getting the guys who can really show up and can really play, which is huge. And you're right, then it wouldn't be like the 3 and 4 Phantom getting eliminated in their conference where they'd be the second seed in another conference. So yeah, I'm totally down to entertain that thought, because I don't know anyone who would push back against it. And I say it all the time, this league is not for me. It's for you guys. So if you really want to see a 7-team one conference, or even a 6-team one conference, and everyone makes the playoffs, and we've done that before. We've done 2 conferences, but everyone makes the playoffs. Regardless, I'm totally down to switch it. I'm totally down to do that. I think it'd be really cool. And it would also eliminate those like 1 to 2 last garbage games when a team knows that they're eliminated and they're just going to play it out, which you guys did an incredible job with.
Yeah.
Pete, what were you going to say?
Yeah, so I definitely like the idea of the fact that if there's no conferences, that means that every game is important. Whereas, when you have 2 conferences, one game is way more important than the next one. And I just think that's kind of silly since, we play every team once. It would be different if, say, the season was longer and we play each team in our conference twice and all the out of conference teams once. But I think that with the way it is, we definitely could use some experimenting and change it up a little bit. And I do think, though, wouldn't it be weird if there were 7 teams? Because wouldn't that mean like one team is having a bye week every week?
We could we could do that. And I think a lot of guys would like that, because
Oh, really?
there's a chance that it falls on your vacation, or you can plan your vacation on your bye week. And yeah, I think that'd be cool. Or you could just show up and watch. I mean, everyone.
Yeah, that's also an interesting.
I think ASL is a lot more appealing at first glance than it actually is for a lot of guys. Meaning, oh wow, like organized league, Instagram presence, people do podcasts, it's organized, people on the back end doing stats. I get a jersey, like that's sick. Sign me up. Sunday at 5 rolls around and you get a more appealing offer to maybe go out or go to some sort of event. I totally understand how you want to go to that more than ASL. But unfortunately, when you sign up, you do kind of have this obligation and this responsibility. And then all of a sudden, like, oh shit, like I don't want the ASL is the last place I want to be on a Sunday right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the tough thing where like people will sign up because it sounds so appealing and it's shiny but preseason, it's so sparkly preseason, and then and unfortunately becomes just kind of a thorn in your side because it is that weekly obligation rather than just everything you saw at first glance. So a bye week might not be the end of the world. And only mitigating and chaperoning 3 games would make Sundays run a lot more efficiently. And if we did implement some sort of rule, now I'm spitballing, but maybe like that 7th team is a sub-based team, like that wouldn't be terrible either. Make everyone's lives a little bit easier. But like I said, I'm spitballing.
Yeah, the sub rule has like the subs got to be addressed. That was kind of a shit show this year. I felt bad for you guys having to deal with that last second, but I
For
think
real.
that will definitely be solved with downsizing. And however that may look, I like the idea of one big conference, whether that's 6 or 7 teams. I think that makes sense. And I think from there you can do, scheduling, and I guess you wouldn't have to worry about making the conferences if it's just one from there. So, yeah, something to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. Boys, the commissioners and I nominated 3 dudes for awards. You guys are the first people to find out the results before I post them on Instagram.
Ooh,
This is
let's
big.
go. Let's go.
What do you say we talk about it?
Let's do it.
We're going to start off with the rookie of the year. We had Louis Gallegani, CJ Puglisi, and Tyler Trapp. I'm going to reveal the last place person in this race first, and then I'm going to reveal the winner. So you can just infer second place.
Yep.
It'd be a lot more dramatic if there was 4
I
or
like
5
that. I
guys,
like that.
but I want to say the winner's name rather than the second
Yeah.
place winner.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so for rookie of the year, the person who received 10.7% of the entire vote, coming in third place for this race, is CJ Puglisi of the Dogs.
ASL champion CJ Puglisi.
Yes,
ASL
sir.
champion CJ Puglisi.
First
High
rookie
attendance,
ever.
class act. Great guy to have in the league. 10%. Now it's between Tyler Trapp and Louis Gallegani. The winner with 71.4% of the vote.
Wow.
I think this is by far the biggest margin in terms of a winner this year, just confirmed, is Louis Gallegani, rookie of the
Wow.
year. I'm
Congrats to
not going to
Louis.
see that coming, right?
That's
Louis
great.
was great to
Yeah.
have in the
Yeah.
league
He was
this
great.
year.
Yeah,
Louis was awesome to have in the league, and I hope he comes back next year. And also, I'm very excited for Ian and Alex Trottier to be back as well.
Great point. Now we have 4th man of the year. This is CJ Puglisi, Ian Hale, and Nick Germano. This was, in my opinion, the award I was glued to the most.
Ian needs this, man. Ian needs this.
In last place, receiving 17.9% of the vote, we have CJ Puglisi once more, which
ASL
means
champion CJ Puglisi.
ASL champion CJ Puglisi, which comes to the gold and silver part of the podium, Nick Germano and Ian Hale. With receiving 57.1% of the votes, the 2024 4th man of the year winner is Ian Hale.
Let's go. Let's go. So
Congrats to
deserved,
Ian,
man.
man.
So
Congrats to
deserved.
Ian. He
I'm
deserves it.
so happy it's Ian Hale. I think this is long overdue.
I
What a
casted
sigh
my
of
vote
relief
for
for
Ian.
Ian.
Huge.
Good for him, man. Good for him.
Which
Great
means Nick
resume.
Germano received 25% of the votes, which is something absolutely worth celebrating.
Ian's been one of the more scrutinized guys in this league.
100%.
For no reason. He deserves this. He deserves a trophy this year. Good for him, especially if there's a chance he doesn't come back next year too. So at least he can leave with some hardware.
Absolutely. Now we have the most improved player. A lot of controversy surrounding this one. A lot of people were texting me and asking why they didn't get the nod. I explained the system. That's how it works. That's how it works in the NBA. So it sucks. Blame the system. Don't hate the player, hate the game.
So true.
But we have our 3 nominees: George Kamboris, Pat Archambault, and Costa Zinzopoulos. This one is nuts. So let me break this down for you.
Okay.
The loser, the person in third place, received 32.1% of the vote. The person in second place received 32.1% of the votes. The winner received 35.7% of the votes.
Wow.
Talk about a tight race.
The
Yeah.
tightest race. So I'm not going to reveal who's in last because it's the same. So I'll just reveal the winner. The winner by a little bit over 2% of the entire vote. Does anyone want to place their bets?
I voted for Arch.
I voted for George.
I voted for Costa. And only one of us voted with majority, and it is me. Most
Wow.
Costa Zinzopoulos.
Good for him.
35.7% of the vote.
I mean,
Crazy.
yeah, good for Costa. But like, if you gave any, like, if you gave anyone a second round role and then made them a captain, I would hope they would be more improved. But good for Costa. He's a baller.
Yeah. We're going to head over to the role player of the year. Shout out to Ryan for creating this award, giving the first place or first/second round guys a chance to shine. Another tight race, not as tight as the last one, but AJ Clark, Pat, and Louie. 3 stand-up guys you want on your squad. In last place, receiving 25% of the vote.
Another close one.
Louis Gallegani finishes in last with receiving 25%.
Wow.
Brings us down to AJ and Pat. The winner, earning 46.4% of the votes, goes to Pat Archambault.
Let's go.
Very deserved.
Good for Pat. Well deserved, man. Well deserved.
AJ Clark was able to collect 28.6% of the league-wide vote.
Good shit, AJ.
We're going to head over to the Depoy. Cole Chingris, Matt Shurk, and Jack Curtin. In last place, receiving 17.9% of the vote, is Jack Curtin.
Okay. Interesting.
He's nominated for his blocks and steals, good rebounds, but wasn't able to collect those. Maybe he's got to work on campaigning. Now we're down to Shurk and Chingris. Pete, who do you think it is?
I think it's Shurk.
Rye?
I'd be shocked if it wasn't Shu.
Yes, with 60.7% of the vote, Matt Shurk is your 2024 Depoy.
Very deserved. Very deserved.
Is this his first Depoy?
Second.
Yeah, not
When
surprised.
did he win last time? Was it 2019?
Something like, yeah, it was a long time ago.
Good for Matt, man. He had a hell of a
Good for Matt. Yeah, I played with Matt. He's a great player to have on your team. Also, I wanted to, now that we're talking about Matt, I wanted to shout out something I heard Matt say, which I thought was funny, but I hope this happens. Is he said that as long as we're all still running this, he'd be down to do ASL every year until we're like 40 years old. So I would really hope that we can get the season. I mean, many more seasons after this one. Obviously, ASL is like the highlight of my summer, and I'm sure some other people's summers. It's so great that we have this sense of community and family. Not a lot of communities have what we have, and we got to be blessed. And it all starts with Andrew and Michael for bringing this league about. And I'm sure you guys never would have thought that it would have came out to what it is today when you guys were initially talking about it in H block.
Yeah, it took the words right out of my mouth, P. I appreciate it. Definitely appreciate it.
But yeah, I love as many more seasons as possible, and I'm sure a lot of other players feel the exact same way.
Cheers.
Yeah, so yeah, cheers. Now we have the most valuable player.
What an intro.
Exactly, right? Thank you, Pete. Connor Fu, Stephen Shaw, and Jack Curtin. Rye, who did you vote for?
It was tough, man. I posed an argument right before the voting week that I was on the fence between Steve and Curtin. I ultimately went with Curtin because he was just such an like impressive individual player this year, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was Steve.
Pete, who'd you vote for?
Yeah, I voted for Curtin, and mainly that's because I just was so impressed and shocked with the Hoopers season this year, and I am not alone on that. I'm pretty sure almost everybody had them missing the playoffs because I don't know, people just looked at what team Jack drafted, and they were kind of like, doesn't really strike fear into my heart like some of these other squads. But it did not matter who was out. Jack Curtin just kept winning. And, it was really, really unfortunate that he was injured at the end of the season last year because that was a big what if the Hatamotos were able to play in the playoffs. But with that being said, man, Jack Curtin, he didn't care. Like he showed up every week and he's showing up and he's trying to win basketball games. And for the majority of the time, that's what he did with, God knows who beside him. He had, some old ASL vets, Evan Miller and Prince Zuko. Like, those are names you haven't heard in years. And he wound up still winning games with these guys and with a revolving door roster, basically. So that's why I voted for him for MVP. But yeah.
Love it. Andrew,
Yeah.
who'd you have?
Yeah, Curtin also earned my vote. He's a freak athlete, and he's the most viable player, in my opinion, on any squad. But yeah, so the person who received the least percentage of votes with 17.9% is Connor Fu of the Sizzlers, received
Hell of a season for
17.9%.
Fu.
Nothing to hang your head low on. I mean, to get an
Oh.
MVP nom and to even earn
Yeah.
17.9% of the vote, especially taking away votes from these two guys, is something to be proud of.
Totally.
Now we're down to Stephen Shaw and Jack Curtin. Your 2024 most valuable player earning 53.6% of the vote is Jack Curtin of the
Wow.
Well deserved.
very
Well
well.
deserved.
Good for
Steve was
him.
able to pull in 28.6% of the vote, which is still a great amount. But boys, there you have it. What is the biggest shock for you in terms of awards? If you need me to reiterate or restate some awards, I would be happy to.
I think one of the bigger shocks is that Dan Gerges didn't get nominated for anything.
Yeah, I'll tell you the same thing I told him. The way we do it is 3, 2, 1. So you nominate 3 guys, you give one guy 3 points, you give one guy 2 points, and one guy 1 point. The way the math worked is that Dan Gerges, I think, showed up on either 3 of 3 or 2 out of the 3 of our nom boards. But the way that we do it is he didn't earn anyone's first or second place vote. So I think the one Dan was coming to me for was most improved. I might be wrong on that, but that
I
would
thought he
make.
was campaigning for him and Carter. I thought he was campaigning for Rollman.
Oh, I definitely didn't. I don't think he earned any of our roll mans, but maybe most improved. I don't want to say that because that might not be true. The reason I didn't want to put him for most improved is like, Dan, you were a good shooter, and then this year you were also a good shooter. Where like your numbers definitely improved. I'll give him that. His numbers improved. But
Yeah.
for me, when comparing him and Costa, like Costa probably averaged, like, if we want to talk numbers, like less than 3 points last year, wasn't even utilized, and then became a captain and was incredible. So that was, and then also George had great numbers and dipped more into an offensive bag. So he also improved not only his numbers, but how he played as a player. And then Pat is another numbers argument. So I don't know. I'll have to compare Dan's numbers. I think if Dan were on this ballot, he would deserve to be there. I don't think him being excluded is him saying he doesn't deserve to be there. A lot of guys improved this year. That's why we know we grew the middle class. That was the goal. That's why the most improved race was so close, because we wanted to grow the middle class. Who knows? If we took Costa out and put Dan in, Costa won, by the way. If we took out the winner and put Dan in, who's to say Dan wouldn't have won? I think Dan could have rallied a lot of votes, and Dan's a guy who'd campaign, which would definitely reflect.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely can't feign.
Yeah.
I wouldn't take Dan for role player. I don't think he was the best draftee.
Yeah.
But
No,
most improved, I think, is something he definitely could have. He was definitely on one of my three.
for
Yeah,
sure.
I know we give a lot of praise to, volume over efficiency, but if you want to talk about efficiency, Dan is definitely one of the most efficient, you know, draftees that can make a three. Because obviously
I
you
would
got,
argue one of the players, Pete. I think he's one of the more efficient players, including
yeah,
captains who can make a three.
yeah.
Totally.
So, I just, that's so valuable when you got a guy like him that can come in and make at least one or two, because most of the time he's going to make at least one or two when he's playing, his normal minutes. So, and he's the only player who's ever in history been drafted in all three rounds, I'm pretty sure, which
That's
is
true.
kind of
Oh, that's a
crazy.
cool stat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is a next gen stat. But that was the goal of this year: grow the middle class, hope like to give the draftees enough opportunities to play well. And Dan really did a good job with that. It's kind of ironic that we wanted to grow the middle class and a captain one still for most improved, but you know what I mean. I think you guys got to see the
Yeah.
byproduct of us trying to grow the middle class nonetheless.
Yeah, no, I'll say, nothing really surprised me. I thought all these were pretty deserving this year, and great end to the year. And I'm excited to see the discourse leading up to next year. And it's a great season.
Yeah. Super bittersweet. I mean, it's always so awesome watching the championship, and I can't wait for the banquet too, whenever that's going to be. But I always really look forward to watching the playoffs, even though personally I haven't uh, had a lot of playoff success, and I haven't really been to the playoffs outside the one year that Steve Shaw carried me to my ring. But I just it's always a really it sucks after the season's over, because it's just like, damn, now we gotta wait, a whole other, 9 months for ASL to be, back and rolling up again. And I really hope that everybody, stays active in the group chat, and everybody, stays connected. Which, I don't think that'll be an issue, but it's just nice to get to talk to everybody like during the off season, and get to hang out with the guys and stuff, because it's one day, unfortunately, we're not going to have this league anymore, and that's just how life works, is all good things must come to an end. But I just hope that this league goes on for as many more seasons as possible. Like Matt Schuerk said, I would do this league every summer until I'm like 40 or I can't move anymore.
Love it.
Yeah, thanks guys
Final thoughts.
for hopping in. Who knows? Maybe we'll do a fun novelty segment. But other than that, 2024 is in the books. Pete, it was a pleasure to have you on for the
Thank you.
finale.
I had
Ryan, always a
one more
pleasure.
thing.
What's
I had
up?
one more thing actually. So I took this from an earlier episode on the season, but I thought it was such an awesome question that you guys asked Steve. But you asked Steve, you said, who is one player that you've always wanted to play with that you haven't had the opportunity to play with? And so I actually thought about that myself. And I was like,
Oh,
wow, like who's somebody that I would really want to play with? Because if you guys don't really know, I've kind of been an ASL journeyman. I've played
no shame.
alongside almost every captain, I think, besides Colin. And that would probably be my one captain that I'd love to be drafted to, is Colin's team.
Great.
Love it. Love it. Get it out
We're
there.
just taking notes. Yeah, that was awesome.
And before this season, my wish list of players, I'm not even lying, was Cadigan. I always wanted to play with Cadigan.
Let's go, Pete.
Especially, and what really did it to me was how I was involved with the dad bods for that one game. And I just I felt like I was a part of that historic run where Ryan, he exclaimed, "We're not losing another game," and that was probably one of the crazy playoff runs in ASL.
Let's go, Pete.
We gotta etch.
Oh yeah, that was like one of my
Let's
number.
go.
I got the trophy in my car. We gotta etch, like put a little carrot on Dad Bod's P. Stylos.
Dude,
Thank
so
you,
that was definitely an awesome thing playing with Ryan, because before this season I had always wanted to play on a team with Ryan, and I was so happy that I was drafted to the Phantom, and I got to play with Pissy, Ryan, and Dennis once again. I loved playing with Dennis again this year. I thought Dennis was amazing this year. I thought he played way better than he did last year.
Yeah, we're gonna have to see what we can do next year, but a lot of different team possibilities, a lot of different league structure possibilities, and this was yet another great year in the books, and it just adds to the headline next year of taking down the GOAT. So we'll see.
Yep.
Yes, sir. So wait, so who would you guys want to play for that you haven't played with?
It's weird now that I'm a draftee, so I'd really play with any captain. It'd be fun to play with any captain. Like the whole
Any
reason I
captain who's
became
bought in, I'm down to run it with any captain who's bought in. Obviously,
yeah,
Colin's the preferred destination, but
I'd like to play with Colin or Curtin maybe.
yeah, Curtin would be wicked fun.
Yes, Curtin would be another one of my choices too. I would love to play for Jack Curtin.
I mean, Pissy got super bought in. Like, would love to play under him as
I
well.
would totally run it back
Any
with Pittsburgh.
captain who's bought in, I would love to play for.
Yeah, and shout out to Pissy because he was the only captain who played me in every single game, no matter what, and that was huge.
Oh, love it.
Huge. All right, boys. Well, thank you so much. We're gonna sign off. We'll stay tuned for next season.